He was a billionaire who thought he had everything: success, power, control, until a 7-year-old boy walked into his office with a trembling letter and 5 words that shattered his world forever. No one knew what was inside that envelope or how it would change lives across the world. This is the story of the letter that saved a soul and the legacy of a child's final wish. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching? The lobby of the Royal Crest Towers glowed with the quiet arrogance of wealth, polished marble floors reflecting chandeliers shaped like frozen fire, walls lined with gold-veined stone, and a scent of expensive silence. People here spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb success itself, and right in the middle of it all sat Ethan Cole, the man who owned it. At 38, Ethan was the youngest CEO in the history of Cole Enterprises, a global real estate empire that shaped skylines in 5 countries. To the world, he was the man who could turn any property into profit. To his employees, he was precision in human form, punctual, unsmiling, ruthless with mistakes. He didn't build buildings. He built monuments to control. That morning, he was seated on a leather sofa, his tablet glowing with numbers and blueprints. He was reviewing a billion-dollar merger that could make headlines, the kind of deal he'd dreamed of since his 20s. He didn't see the little boy until a small shadow fell across the tablet. Ethan looked up, annoyed first, then puzzled. A boy stood in front of him, no older than 7. His brown hair was slightly messy, his oversized t-shirt tucked neatly into jeans that looked a size too big. He held a crumpled envelope in both hands, as if it contained something sacred. "Sir," the boy said softly, his voice trembling. Can you read this letter? It's very important." Ethan blinked. "What?" The boy swallowed hard, glancing down at the envelope again. "I tried to read it myself, but some words are too hard. Mom said maybe someone kind would help." Ethan frowned. "Where are your parents?" "She's upstairs," the boy said quickly. "She's resting. The doctor said she has to rest more now." Ethan sighed quietly, already shifting his attention back to the tablet. "Listen, kid, I'm busy. Maybe you can ask the front desk." The boy's voice didn't change, but his eyes did. There was something in them, a quiet desperation that didn't belong to a child that young. "Please, sir," he whispered. "It's for my mom. She said someone has to read it today." Something about the way he said today made Ethan pause. He wasn't used to that. People begging him for money, maybe, but not for something so small and human. He studied the boy more closely. His hands shook a little, not from fear, but from holding the letter so tightly for too long. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, setting his tablet down. "Liam," the boy said. "Liam Hayes. I'm 7.5. Ethan nodded slowly. "All right, Liam, why don't you sit down for a second?" The boy climbed onto the chair beside him, his sneakers barely touching the marble. He placed the envelope carefully on his lap, like it might fall apart. "It's from the people at the care center," Liam explained. "The lady with the red hair wrote it for my mom. She said it's important because it's about—" "What happens next?" Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, what happens next?" Liam hesitated. "Mom's been sick a long time. Her heart's tired," she says. "The lady told me they need someone to help with papers. I don't know what papers, but Mom said maybe an angel would come and help." The word angel hung in the air like a strange echo against the cold marble. Ethan took the envelope. It was slightly smudged, the handwriting uneven, the ink faint in some places, as if written in hurry and tears. He opened it. Inside was a typed letter from St. Maron's Hospice Support. His eyes skimmed the words, and his breath caught before he reached the second paragraph. It explained that Grace Hayes, a former nurse and Liam's mother, was in advanced heart failure. Her condition was terminal. She had no remaining family. Her husband had died in an accident 4 years earlier, and her insurance had run out. They were living temporarily in one of Cole Enterprises' low-income units, a building Ethan owned but had never stepped inside. The letter requested an urgent meeting to discuss arrangements for her son. They needed a guardian identified before transferring him into the child care system. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. Small, hurried letters from the hospice worker. Grace is too weak to handle the paperwork herself. Liam is aware of her condition. Please respond quickly. She may not have many days left. Ethan stared at the paper for several seconds without moving. Around him, the lobby went on. The sound of heels clicking, the faint clatter of suitcases, but it all seemed far away now. He looked at the boy again. Do you know what's in this letter, Liam? The boy hesitated, his eyes searching Ethan's face.
Not all of it.
But I know it's about me. His voice cracked on the last word. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat that he didn't even realize had formed. It's a letter to help make sure you're taken care of, he said carefully. Your mom wants to make sure you're safe. Liam nodded slowly, his eyes glassy. She said she's going to heaven soon. Like Dad. Something inside Ethan's chest, something he'd buried under years of deals and deadlines, shifted. He cleared his throat and looked away. He could have ended it there. He could have handed the letter to the concierge, told them to call the hospice office, and walked out. That was the efficient, logical choice. The kind of choice Ethan Cole always made, but he didn't. Instead, he heard himself ask quietly, "Where's your mom right now, Liam?" "She's in our room," Liam said. "Room 824. She said she wanted to see the city lights one more time. But she gets tired fast now." The boy's voice trembled on the word tired. Ethan hesitated, his mind screaming that this wasn't his problem, that there were systems for this, people trained for this, but his heart, the one he'd ignored for years, whispered something different. "All right," he said softly. "Let's go see your mom." Liam's face lit up with such pure relief that Ethan had to look away again. "Really, you'll help?" Ethan forced a smile. "Let's find out what we can do." The boy slipped his small hand into Ethan's without hesitation. It was warm, fragile, and it made Ethan's perfectly ordered world tilt slightly off its axis. As they stepped into the elevator, Liam looked up at him. "Mom says sometimes angels don't have wings," he said. "She says they wear suits and help people who are lost." Ethan almost laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I'm not an angel, kid," Liam shrugged. "Maybe not yet." The elevator doors closed. For the first time in a decade, Ethan didn't think about his schedule, his merger, or the investors waiting upstairs. He thought about a boy with a letter he couldn't read, and a mother who might not live long enough to say goodbye. As the elevator climbed, the mirrored walls reflected Ethan's face. Sharp suit, calm expression, everything perfectly in place, except for his eyes. They looked different, softer, haunted. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, Liam tugged his hand and led him down the hallway. "It's this way," the boy said. "Mom says our room smells like sunshine and medicine." Ethan managed a faint smile. "That's an interesting combination." "It's because she likes to keep the window open," Liam said, "even when it's cold. She says the light helps her breathe better." They stopped outside room 824. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key attached to a blue ribbon. He slipped it into the lock, turning it with practiced care. The door opened with a soft click. Ethan's first impression was the sunlight, pale and fragile, spilling across the room like something sacred. The curtains fluttered slightly from the breeze. A vase of wilted daisies stood by the window. And on the bed, surrounded by neatly stacked medicine bottles and oxygen tubing, lay a woman with a smile too gentle for her condition. Her hair was pale and thin, her skin almost translucent, but her eyes, when they opened, were clear and full of life. "Mom," Liam said, running to her side, "this is the man who's going to help." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, unsure whether to step closer or run back to the safety of his world of contracts and marble floors. Grace Hayes looked at him, really looked, and smiled faintly. "You must be Mr. Cole," she whispered. "I recognize you from the building news. My son has quite an imagination, bringing CEOs to our little world." Her voice was weak but calm. Ethan walked forward slowly. "Your son asked me to read this," he said, holding out the letter. Her gaze softened. "He did?" She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing the paper. He never lets go of that letter. Said it's the most important thing he's ever carried. Liam climbed onto the bed beside her, curling into her side. He said, "Yes, Mom," he said, smiling. "He's going to help us." Grace's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of relief. Ethan didn't understand why, but he suddenly felt the same. The golden light from the window fell across them, the boy, his mother, and the man who had spent his life building towers that touched the clouds, but never people. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Ethan Cole wasn't sure what came next, but he knew this, whatever it was, it had just begun with a letter, a very important one. The morning after the letter, Ethan Cole stood before the mirror, staring at the reflection of a man he barely recognized. His eyes, usually sharp with control, looked uncertain, almost human. The letter still lay unfolded on the marble sink beside him, its edges softened by the night's restless touch. "The empire you built will outlast you only if the man inside it survives." Those words followed him, like a quiet echo through the day. At the office, screens glowed, numbers rolled, and people moved with mechanical precision. Ethan sat at the head of his boardroom table, surrounded by the sound of success. Polished shoes, tapping keys, voices measured to impress. Yet for the first time in years he felt detached. Every sentence about profit, expansion, or domination sounded hollow. As the meeting ended, he didn't return to his corner suite. Instead, he took the elevator down lower and lower, past the glittering floors where his name was engraved on glass, to the ground level where the noise of the city lived and breathed. Outside, rain drizzled softly over the pavement. Across the street, a man sold coffee from a cart. The aroma cut through the metallic scent of the city. Ethan walked over, almost on impulse. The vendor greeted him with a smile so genuine, it felt like warmth itself. "Rough morning?" the man asked, handing over a steaming cup. Ethan paused. "Something like that," the vendor laughed lightly. "Happens to all of us, brother. World spins too fast, and we forget we're standing on it." That sentence landed harder than it should have. Ethan smiled faintly and walked away, the cup trembling slightly in his hand. Back in his car, he turned off the music, the phone, everything. Silence filled the space, a silence that wasn't empty but listening. For the first time in years, Ethan felt it. A hunger not for achievement, but for meaning. That night he couldn't sleep. The city pulsed beyond his windows, alive and uncaring. He opened the letter again. At the bottom, almost hidden, was a line he hadn't noticed before. "Return to where you stop becoming yourself." He read it again. Then again. What did that mean? Memories stirred, dusty, uninvited. A small apartment with bare walls. A woman laughing in the kitchen, the scent of paint and coffee. His first business, his first dream, the first time he'd stayed up all night not for profit, but for purpose. He hadn't been back there in over a decade. The next morning before dawn, Ethan drove, out of the city, into the past. The apartment building still stood, old bricks chipped, windows fogged. The world around it had changed, but the air there felt familiar. He climbed the narrow staircase, his footsteps echoing softly. When he reached the old door, something in him hesitated. The place was now rented by someone else, but he didn't knock. He just stood there listening. Through the thin walls came the faint sound of a baby crying, a woman humming to soothe it. Life continuing where his had once begun. He whispered almost to himself, "I forgot what this sounded like." Outside, the morning light was breaking, soft gold through grey clouds. Ethan stood there until the sun rose fully. He felt no grand revelation, no cinematic thunderclap, just a quiet, steady understanding. He had spent years climbing higher, only to realize the air at the top was too thin to breathe. That day marked the start of small, invisible changes. He began walking to work some mornings. He started greeting people by name, the receptionist, the janitor, the interns. The first few times they looked surprised, even suspicious. But slowly, their guarded politeness turned into genuine smiles. He began visiting old friends he hadn't spoken to in years, some who had stayed grounded while he'd floated upward. They didn't talk about business. They talked about music, mistakes, laughter, about life. At night, Ethan found himself writing, not emails, not reports, but letters, to people he'd wronged, to the person he used to be. To no one in particular. He never sent them. He didn't need to. The act of writing itself became a confession. Weeks passed, and the company began to shift. Meetings grew quieter but deeper. The energy changed. Not because Ethan gave new orders, but because he started listening. Then came the day he returned to the hotel lobby, the same one where it had all begun. The same polished floors, the same chandelier shimmering above. He sat in the same chair and waited, half hoping the stranger would return. No one came, but he realized something. The letter wasn't sent to him. It was sent through him. It was a message meant to awaken not just Ethan Cole, but the countless others living as he had, breathing, yet asleep. He pulled a pen from his pocket, wrote something on a folded piece of paper, and placed it under the same vase where he'd found the first letter. It read, "If you're reading this, maybe it's your turn. Don't chase the light at the end of the tunnel. Learn to light the one you're in." And then he walked away, not to escape, but to return. For the first time, Ethan Cole wasn't the man who built empires. He was simply a man, rediscovering the quiet power of being alive. Months passed. Seasons changed. But something about Ethan Cole's days had grown unrecognizable. Softer, slower, and far more alive. He still arrived at his office every morning, but he no longer came to conquer it. The once intimidating glass tower that bore his name now felt like a living space instead of a battlefield. The air was different. Conversations had laughter in them. Meetings carried moments of silence that felt like respect, not fear. It began quietly, one small decision at a time. Ethan replaced the company's mission statement, stripping out every word about dominance and replacing them with two. To matter. The board hated it at first. They called it vague, unprofitable, weak. But Ethan didn't argue. He just smiled. Over the next few weeks, profits didn't fall and they rose. Not because of better strategies, but because people started believing again. Departments that had felt invisible suddenly found purpose. Employees began volunteering on weekends, creating outreach programs, donating resources to local schools. No one told them to. They just followed the quiet energy that had started flowing through their leader. Ethan didn't talk about the letter anymore. But every decision he made carried its echo. One winter morning, as the first snow fell outside his office, Ethan received a message from someone unexpected. Grace, his former business partner. She was the one he'd once pushed out of the company years ago, in one of the most ruthless deals of his career. Her email was short. "I saw what you're doing. I don't know who you've become, but I hope it's real. If it is, meet me at the place where it ended." The place was an old warehouse, the first space they'd ever rented when their business was just an idea scrawled on napkins. Ethan hadn't been there since the night he'd forced her out. He went. The warehouse stood silent beneath the grey sky, its doors rusted but still strong. Inside, dust danced in the cold light, and the faint smell of engine oil and memory hung in the air. Grace was already there, standing in the middle of the floor, wearing a long grey coat and that same sharp look that once terrified boardrooms. "You actually came," she said. "I owed you that," Ethan replied quietly. She crossed her arms. "You owe me more than a visit, Ethan," he nodded. "I know." They stood in silence for a long time, two ghosts of their younger selves, surrounded by the ruins of ambition. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "I got lost. Somewhere between wanting to build something great and wanting to be someone great. I forgot what it was all for." Grace studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "And now?" "Now," he said, looking around the empty space, "I want to build something that doesn't need to be owned, to be real." For the first time, she smiled. Not fully, but enough. They talked for hours, not about mergers or markets, but about beginnings. By the time the snow stopped outside, something unspoken had been forgiven. When Ethan left, the weight he'd carried for years felt lighter. Word of Ethan's new approach began to spread. Journalists called it the cold shift. Analysts debated it. Some called it genius. Others called it madness. But those who worked with him simply called it different. He started a new project, the Letter Initiative. It wasn't a company. It wasn't even a foundation. It was just a movement, people writing letters. Not emails or posts, but handwritten letters to strangers, mentors, loved ones, even themselves. Letters that carried truth, apology, gratitude, or hope. Soon thousands joined. Across the city, cafes and libraries set up letter corners. People came, sat, wrote, and left their envelopes for others to find. A janitor found one that read, "You're more than the floor you clean." A struggling student found one that said, "You are not behind, you are becoming." And a tired single mother found one that whispered, "You are the reason someone else still believes in love." The movement grew beyond Ethan. He stopped being its center, and that was how he knew it was real. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Ethan sat by his window reading letters from strangers who had been touched by the initiative. He smiled at their stories, people finding forgiveness, courage and meaning through simple words left behind. He reached for the original letter again, the one that had started it all. The paper had grown delicate, the ink fading slightly, but its message still burned clear. As he folded it back into its envelope, he noticed something odd, a faint watermark beneath the writing. He held it up to the light. It wasn't a logo, but initials, GW. His breath caught. He knew those initials, Grace Whitmore. She had written it. Ethan leaned back, the world around him fading into quiet awe. The woman he had betrayed had sent him the message that saved him. The person he had pushed down had been the one to lift him up from afar. Tears welled in his eyes, not of guilt this time, but gratitude. He whispered into the silence, "Thank you." Outside, the city lights shimmered like countless souls awakening, each one a reminder that a single act of truth, a single message of hope, could start a chain reaction far greater than its author could ever imagine. Ethan finally understood. The letter was never meant to change him alone. It was meant to remind everyone who touched it that light doesn't stay where it's found. It spreads where it's shared. That night he wrote his final letter. He didn't sign it. He didn't seal it. He simply left it on the windowsill, open to the wind. To whoever needs this, you are not too late to become someone new. Every ending you fear is just the world waiting for you to start again. The wind caught the page, lifted it gently, and carried it out into the night. A single flutter of paper against the endless city sky. And somewhere, far below, another stranger would one day find it and begin their story. The wind that night carried more than winter. It carried a secret. Through crowded streets and narrow alleys, over rooftops and rivers of headlights, a single page danced like a fragile heartbeat. It twisted between raindrops, brushed against billboards, and drifted past faces too busy to look up, until it landed softly on the cracked steps of a rundown subway entrance. That's where Maya Reed found it. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be somewhere else, anywhere else, far from the ache of another day that hadn't gone right. Maya was 27, a dreamer turned exhausted survivor. Once she'd painted walls with color and joy. Now she painted them for rent money. Her sketchbook, once overflowing with hope, sat unopened for months beneath her bed. That night she had missed her last train. The rain was steady, the city indifferent. As she pulled her coat tighter, something white caught her eye. A sheet of paper fluttering against her shoe. Curiosity made her pick it up. The ink was smudged at the edges, but the words were still clear enough to read, "To whoever needs this, you are not too late to become someone new. Every ending you fear is just the world waiting for you to start again." She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't the first time she had read comforting words. She'd seen thousands on posters, posts and screens, but this one was different. Because this one had weight. It was real, imperfect, alive. And for reasons she couldn't explain, it felt written for her. Maya slipped the letter into her pocket and took the long way home. Her apartment was small, a single room with peeling paint and a window that overlooked the hum of the city. She taped the letter to the wall beside her bed. All night, she kept looking at it, as if it might disappear if she blinked. By morning, something subtle had changed inside her. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the memory of it. She went to work as usual, a mural assistant on a construction site where creativity was rationed and deadlines ruled. But that day, when the foreman shouted, when the paint spilled, when the hours stretched grey and endless, she reached into her pocket and touched the letter. It grounded her. It whispered something invisible. Not everything will be fine, but keep moving. That evening she did something she hadn't done in months. She opened her sketchbook. The first page was blank, yellowed at the corners. She hesitated, then began to draw. Not something grand, just the outline of a hand holding a piece of paper. But as the pencil moved, her breathing changed. It was slower, steadier. The noise in her head quieted, and in that silence she heard something faint, her own voice, the one she'd buried beneath the noise of survival. Days turned into weeks. Each morning Maya read the letter before leaving for work. Each night, she added something new to her sketchbook, sometimes a face, sometimes a dream. The pages began to fill again. Then one afternoon, as she waited for the bus, she noticed a boy sitting on the curb, shivering. His clothes were torn, his eyes red from crying. People walked past him without seeing. Maya almost did too. Almost. She stopped, walked over, and sat beside him. "You okay?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "I lost my dog," he muttered. He ran off. "He's all I have." She didn't know what to say. So she reached into her bag, tore a page from her sketchbook, and drew a quick sketch of a small dog with a heart around it. Then she wrote underneath, "Sometimes what we lose finds its way back. Maybe not the same way, but it does." She handed it to him. "Keep this," she said, "until he comes back." The boy stared at it, then smiled, just barely. It was enough. As the bus pulled away, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years, the quiet joy of giving. That night, inspired by the moment, she wrote her own letter. She didn't copy Ethan's words. She wrote her own. "To the tired soul reading this, you don't have to shine every day. Sometimes surviving is a kind of light too." She left it at a coffee shop table. The next morning, someone had taken it. She wrote another, then another. Soon it became her ritual to leave one letter each day, somewhere new. In a library book, on a train seat, beneath a park bench. Her words began to wander, just like the one that had found her months later. Maya's art began to change. Her sketches became murals, not commercial pieces, but street art that carried messages of quiet defiance and hope. One day, a local journalist discovered her work and published an article titled, "The Girl Who Writes Letters to Strangers." The story spread. People started searching for her murals, posting pictures of the words she'd painted. "You are seen. You are enough. You are still here." And that means something. She never took credit. She just smiled and kept painting. But one morning, as she walked through a crowded street, she noticed something pinned to a lamppost. A letter, folded neatly and sealed with a golden pin. Curious, she opened it. It read, "Dear Maya, the world you are painting is the one I always hoped someone would see. The letter that found you was once mine. Keep it moving." Ethan Cole. Her hands trembled. She looked around, half expecting to see him. But there was only the city, vast, humming, alive. She smiled through tears. She finally knew the name behind the words that had saved her. That night she wrote one final letter of her own, the one that would close the circle. "To the one who started it all, the light you lit didn't fade. It became 1,000 tiny stars, and somewhere out there, one of them will find someone else, just like it found me." She left it at the same subway steps where she had once found his, and as the wind lifted the page once more, it carried the promise forward into another life, another heart, another beginning. Because letters, like hope, are never truly lost. They just wait to be found.